Hello, I'm Elliot Hack, Community Relations Associate here at Ida Culver House, Ravenna. Before we start today's presentation, I would like to share a little bit about our beautiful community. Ida Culver House, Ravenna is a premier retirement community located in the heart of Ravenna in Seattle, featuring warm and cozy apartments, 3 excellent meals provided daily, a rich calendar of life enrichment activities to keep our residents physically, mentally, and spiritually engaged, and many wonderful shops and delicious restaurants within a short walk. Residents are able to live here independently or with some assistance. We have a lovely cottage garden with a well-maintained walking path, blueberry bushes, and a community pea patch with raised garden beds. We're also excited to share that our residents and staff were among the first in the state to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, with our community receiving the second dose of the vaccine just last week. If you're interested in learning more, our community relations team would be happy to answer questions or take you on a personal tour of our community by appointment. I look forward to meeting you in person. And now, on to our main event. We are honored today to host Dick Carruthers, who will be presenting on selling your home. Dick Carruthers of Windermere has been a realtor for over 30 years and has successfully negotiated and closed hundreds of transactions in all kinds of market conditions. Dick has earned a Senior Real Estate Specialist designation and is on the advisory board of Windermere's Senior Transitions Group. He is passionate about working with seniors and the special people in their lives. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dick. Take it away.
All right, well, thank you so much for all of you that are attending the webinar today. As Elliot mentioned, my name is Dick Carruthers, and I've been with Windermere for over 30 years. My specialty, if you will, is working with the senior demographic to help them with all of their real estate needs. That means not only just helping them to buy or sell a home, but to also help with the entire pieces of the puzzle that go into making a move, especially when you've been in your house perhaps 30, 40, 50 years. There's a lot more to it than just putting a sign out on the yard. The Senior Real Estate Specialist designation, it's a group of nationwide real estate agents who have taken numerous clock hours of classes and who also specialize working with the senior community. What that does is give us access to all the different things folks like yourself are going through, and learning that, hopefully able to guide you when the time comes so that your transition is smooth and as less stressful and trouble-free as possible. So what I wanted to first share with you is when people are making a decision whether it's a good time to sell their property or make a move, questions come up. What is the marketplace doing? We all can read, we all get feedback. There's a lot of information out there, but I wanted to break it down for you so that it's easily understood. The first thing that makes up for a good real estate market for a seller is the cost for the buyer to borrow money, and are there favorable loan programs available to get mortgages? And the answer to that is yes. Interest rates are pretty much for mortgages at historic lows, some below 3%. And whether the buyer's putting 5% down, 20% down, there's great loan programs out there. Of course, the buyer has to qualify, have good credit scores, and whatnot. But it's pretty simple today if you've got a good motivated buyer. As far as prices of homes go, each of your neighborhoods and where you live, of course, have their own value system. And what I'm going to cover here today is just the general Seattle area, because I don't know where most of you reside at. Year to date, and that's going from last year to this year, the median price of homes that sold in Seattle was $785,000. And that's up over 6.1%. So it's been a pretty steady increase in values. If any of you are condominium owners, of course, it goes the same. If you're living in a high-rise downtown, or you're living in a smaller community, more in the suburbs, they all vary. But again, condominiums, the average median price was $475,000, and that was up 3.3%. So again, good positive response there. As far as job growth goes, with the COVID-19 scenario out there, a lot of people have lost their jobs, but it tends to, in our Seattle market, gravitate more towards restaurant people, hairstylists, various peripheral occupations. These tech sectors are still employing people as we speak with handsome incomes. So there are plenty of buyers available. And then lastly, as in any marketplace, supply and demand really is one of the crucial components when it comes to real estate sales. Currently, most neighborhoods are not meeting the demand or the supply for the demand that's out there. So if you've been reading a bit, paying a little more attention to what's Seattle real estate's doing, it's low supply, high demand. And what that equates into in many cases is we are still seeing multiple offers on property and property being bid up. Now, of course, again, case by case basis, depends on the amenities you have, where you live, but it's really a very positive environment should now be the time that you're considering making a move. The future, your guess is as good as mine. Okay. What I'm going to share with you too a little bit in this presentation, not only getting the home ready, some real estate facts, etc., but also because of the organization I'm a member of, and they do a lot of studying of what actually are people going through. Because again, when it comes down to making a move, it's a very emotional time. You don't want to make mistakes. And so I'm going to share with you throughout this some things that others like yourself have thought about, and to let you know that you're not alone if your thoughts are going to certain things, because a lot of people have gone through it. So the Senior Real Estate Specialist Group, what they do is they poll and have surveys roughly of around 700 people in all different locations. And the age group, roughly 72 to 85 years of age. And so one question that was floated out there is, well, you have a great marketplace to sell into. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to at some point have a place to go to. But a lot of people responded because they were asked what fears are holding one back from making a move, even though it feels like the time to do so or the time to prepare to. And the number one fear was fear of change. Just the sheer fact that, we plant our roots pretty deeply in our homes over the decades, and just the fear of the routine being changed can be daunting in people. The next one, fear of downsizing, packing, and sorting. I would say that of all the different things that go into a successful move, I have found most people's fear of downsizing, packing, and sorting is real. There's a lot to it. It doesn't happen overnight, but there are methods and a process available that make it as smooth as can possibly be. The next one is, am I going to miss my home? Am I making the right decision? Missing one's home, it's a natural thing that 99% of us will experience at some point in time. But in the end, you're going to take your memories with you. You don't leave them behind in the house. That's where sometimes there's an adage when we go on the market, your home becomes a house. And am I making the right decision? And the right decisions are easier to make when you've got more information available to you. And that's why perhaps some of the things I'm sharing with you today will help further that. But again, it's important to take some time and really get the questions and the core issues out there on the table so that you're comfortable in making that decision. And interesting enough, was brought up is financial concerns. And if any of you have been out visiting various communities, wherever you're at some point thinking of going, finances usually come into play. But when asked, the financial concerns were really the bottom of the list as far as thinking about making the move. Any questions there?
No questions yet.
All right. Likewise, there was a questionnaire out there and a poll. What are the top reasons that you had to make a move? And 42% of the respondents said maintaining the house. And even for those of you who might have the means to have everything hired out, it's been kind of proven that as one is in the home in later years, that you look outside, you see all these projects that need to be done, and it starts to wear on one's psyche, if you will. And so that, again, that was the number one thing. The second one was health issues. And what I have firsthand experienced with the clientele that I've worked with is, and I recommend that if you know that, or have a pretty good guesstimate that there's going to be some health issues, and I'm not saying you predict 10 or 15 years down the road, but that could be a little more imminent. It is a much better time then to start thinking and kind of starting to think about what we're talking about and perhaps where one's going to move to. It makes for a much more sane decision-making and a lot less stressful. I've also worked with folks who tried to clean gutters, fell off a ladder, broke a hip, slipped on stairs. I mean, just, you name it. And at that point, of course, they go in, they get things fixed. Perhaps you have to go to rehab for an interim before you go home. And there are times when it's suggested by the healthcare professionals, family, perhaps, et cetera, that going home isn't perhaps the best route for you to take. It's those times that then rash decisions are made, because most of the places that you might consider moving to, they have waiting lists. So it's not a matter of, well, I need to move into your community in 3 or 4 weeks. It doesn't tend to work that way. You end up having to compromise. It's stressful, and you really want to save yourself from making 2 moves when the time comes. As far as downsizing, it was interesting that the home is too large. Only 10% of the people felt their homes were too large. And I've surmised that it basically comes down to we get used to the space, because one thing I know for sure is we tend to fill up whatever space we have. And I've seen many times one person, maybe 2, are living in a home that's 3,500 square feet with 5 bedrooms and 4 baths, and it's just them. So most of the house is, the doors are shut and it's not even being used. And the last one reason was loneliness. And I'm sure if you were to talk again with Elliot about something of that nature or these things, he could probably impart to you what experiences their residents have gone through. Because it's been proven that as we get older and we're not as out and about as much, that losing the human contact is not healthy for you. And the health starts to deteriorate. And so I've heard a lot of people that have moved say to me, I wish I would have done this a couple of years sooner, because they're now interacting positively with people. They're eating better. But it's real, and it happens. So I wanted to make you aware of that. All right, we're now going to get into the portion of the actual selling of your home or condominium. And so I'm going to just touch on a few things that I think are important. There's a lot involved, but for the purposes of the webinar, there's too much information to cover in one day. But I think the first thing that people tend to do when they're considering the selling of their home is, who are we going to use as our agent for, and hopefully you're thinking in terms of, is this agent going to be my advocate? And are they going to have the knowledge and the background to guide me through all of these different little steps that we've been talking about? In the state of Washington for years, for decades, and perhaps maybe you bought or sold a home, it used to be that all real estate agents represented the seller. And the rationale was, well, the seller's paying the commission. And even though the seller or the agents don't know you and you don't know them, won't meet them, technically they represented the seller. But in today's marketplace, the definitions have changed quite substantially. When you hire a real estate agent to represent you, you're also hiring the office, the company that they work for. So it's kind of a two-part, but the agent is your contact and the only person that works for you. Okay. If a buyer is working with an agent, whether it's an agent in your company or an agent with XYZ company, there's numerous agents out there, they will strictly represent the buyer with the purchase of the home. So they really have no relationship with you and are only looking out for the interests of the buyer. We're also in the state allowed to practice what's called dual agency. And what that means is that, say you hire an agent to come out and represent you for selling your home. Well, and they happen to have a friend who's a buyer or whatnot come along. They are legally allowed to represent both parties. But I have learned over the decades that one individual cannot truly represent both buyer and seller in the same real estate transaction. It just would almost literally mean you can't give advice to anybody, because it would, the question you have may be something not in the buyer's interest, vice versa. So again, I bring this up because oftentimes it's a discussion that the brokers meaning real estate agents, not they don't necessarily bring it up. It's in a contract, but it's not something that, comes up for discussion. But what I will impart is that if your home's on the market and the agent you hired thinking they're representing you totally comes in with an offer and, says, hey, this may be a low offer, but I think you ought to take it. It's a little late when the contract's sitting in front of you and this discussion to come up. So again, if you're one that's going to interview people and this is important to you, bring it up front so that you know what you're going to get into at some point in time. Any questions?
No questions yet. Just a quick reminder that if you do have any questions, you can click the little chat button at the bottom of the screen and a little chat box should pop up at the right. You can put your questions in there.
All right. Communication with the client, I think, is of critical importance to a smooth, successful transaction. And over the years, I have, firsthand experienced and seen how many people work, etc. So what I did years ago was to try to address a few very important ones in writing. And the first one was called a communication and activity report. And what that really breaks down to is all along the way, you need to be aware of everything that's going on. Even if it's, did you talk to a moving company today, Dick? Or your home's on the market and you're having buyers coming through and whatnot. What are the buyers saying? You need to hear the candid feedback from the buyers and their agents to be able to make good decisions for yourself when the time comes to look at an offer. So many times one can run into, people are asked, well, how's the sales activity going on your home? And oftentimes I've heard consumers, before COVID, there would be many events that I would attend at Era Living places. And, you're mixing with lots of different people. And the number one concern was, well, I'm not really sure because my agent, things were gung-ho at the beginning, but I haven't heard from them in a week or two of what's happening. Well, again, my belief is you find out how one wants to communicate, whether it's on the phone, Zoom meetings, texting. I don't really see at this point that Twitter and some of those avenues are as effective because you're not really able to get to what someone's feeling or whatnot. So that's the one. The second one is, it's called a quick cancel guarantee. And it doesn't happen often, but what can occur is when you list your property for sale with a real estate agent, it's for a certain period of time. And the contract basically states that if an offer comes in or, whatnot, that you're liable to pay the broker the commission. Well, occasionally you may start on the market and then something occurs. Is it a health scenario that pops up? Just yourself or a spouse, or is there a family emergency or something that comes up that no one could see when you originally intended to sell your home? So there's two ways that can be handled. One is many real estate agents, there's a form, and what they'll do is they'll take your home off the market for you, but they'll still, for the period of time it's listed, ask that if you sell the home to anybody, that you're due that they're due the commission. Even if it's you decided, that your son-in-law or son or daughter wanted to buy the house, they would still ask that you pay the commission. My response to that is, if there's really something that's that important where you just can't be on the market now, well, then we discuss it and we can cancel the agreement and you're free to go on your way. Now, of course, once you're under contract with a buyer to buy your property, that's too late to then ask for a quick cancel to consider then moving ahead, with the buyer on your own or whatnot. Lastly, I offer people as a thank you for attending these webinars. If they choose at some point that we work together, $1,000 discount off of my fee at the closing of the transaction. And what this will allow is you're going to all have some costs involved in getting your property ready for sale. And that can help with house cleaners, window cleaners, some of those type of vendors. And again, it's something that I think is important, and I wanted to pass that on to you. All right, on that discussion of communication, again, I think it's critical that everybody be on the loop with what everybody's thinking, so that your transaction can be smooth, so that any bad experiences you may have had in the past don't get duplicated. So what I've put together and is a questionnaire. It's like 4 pages long. And a couple of the questions, for instance, that I want to just bring up here is, do you have a financial advisor? So many times I've met people who you own real estate, you have equity in your home, but have you really sat down with your financial person to look at your income stream and those type of things to make sure that you're able to afford to do what you would like to do, because it can become very frustrating. You've been out there looking or whatnot. I have seen some people get a call from a community of choice and say, okay, your name's up, only to find out that the stock market changed or that they don't really have the wherewithals to make it happen. So again, that's one that I think is important for any individual to really figure out that game plan up front. I also, at the end of the questionnaire, assume it's 6 months from now, describe the perfect situation for yourselves. Most people, and I mean, when you're deciding to sell, if you've got any confidants, spouse, children, anybody who may be instrumental in answering and helping you make decisions, what I recommend is that these questionnaires, that you each fill out one. At some point, they share it with me, but share it with yourselves and those significant others, just to make sure you're all on the same page with the direction you want to go in. It can help clear your thoughts. It can also be a challenge if, as an example, I have visited people out at their homes, kind of gone through this, and at the very end, I'm talking with a couple, and one person says, well, the perfect situation for me is, I'd like to go out more. The house is just too much. Yard work, whatever the situation is, and other things that you'd like to take interest in rather than the house. And so one of the couples will say, well, yeah, I'd like to do this, this, and this. And the other spouse says, well, no, I've got plans to go out to my shop next spring and start working on my project. And so I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh my word, you guys aren't on the same page. And one will say, well, no, they want to move, but I really don't want to right now. Well, better to know that up front, better to know that perhaps an adult person, or sometimes you even find that financial advisors will say, well, no, I think you're best me, working with your money and you not moving to a community. Well, at the end of the day, it's your decision. You know yourselves better than most. But again, it's a perfect way to not run into that. So basically, that particular couple I mentioned, it was like 6-7 months later, and they indeed had decided to make a move. But it took time to work it out. So you might as well work it out while you can, not when you're in the heat of signing up for where you want to move to. And again, if you want one of these questionnaires, I'm happy to email it to you or send it to you or whatnot for you to have. And perhaps it'll be helpful in sorting out your thoughts and whatnot as your process begins. Let's talk now about the steps in preparing your house and your condominium if you're in a condominium for sale. The basic difference will be that your home, you've got an outside and an inside to address. In your condominium, you've got the inside to address because of the associations in charge of the outside appearance, etc. But how we live in a home on a day-to-day basis and how we try to sell a home for top dollar, they can be two different things. When buyers start looking out there for a property to purchase, they make their buying decisions based on emotion. And then they go back in pretty quick order and justify the decision with a logical, rational criteria. That's why it's important, especially with internet today, photo galleries, all of these different mediums, that anything that's produced in the marketing of your home be professionally shot, full color, quality, because that's the message you want to put out there to any buyer that's perhaps considering your home. Likewise, what occurs is a buyer will, when they have figured out that they're pre-approved, in other words, their credit has been checked, they can afford the price range your home is in. First thing they do, they look at the internet, and then they go out and decide to drive by the different homes that are for sale. And they start making their decisions from the moment they drive up. So anything we can do within reason to the outside of your property and the inside of the property, we do, so that the buyer will become very emotionally and will write an offer on your home in pretty timely order. Now, as a seller, you want to keep in mind when we're going through this, and of course, this is something that I guide people through, so the questions are all asked and addressed. The seller needs to keep in mind that the home will be viewed through the eyes of a few different types of people. Obviously, the eyes will be the buyer, the real estate agent, who will immediately see the listing of the home come up. So, catering what we do to the listing agent, or the buyer's agent, is important. There also is what's called home inspectors. And the majority of homes today, the buyers will, at their cost, have a home inspection done on the house to determine if mechanically it will, it's in the condition that they think it is. The home inspector is not there to critique what the carpet looks like or the countertops look like. He's there to look at furnaces, electrical service panels, roofs, etc. And the last one, unless it's a cash offer, you have a bank appraiser. And they come out to look at the house. They pretty much just kind of peripherally check and say, okay, is the service panel, electrical service panel, has that been updated? That's still the old fuses on the back porch of a home. Well, it's something to keep in mind. If you've got, half of the roof has a tarp over it because it needs a new roof, well, we need to address that because if we don't, the bank appraiser might. And if they decide that they don't want to lend on the home for the bank based on these conditions, then they either have to be fixed or the buyer won't be able to get the loan. So again, basically that's how those things we just discussed is meeting at your property, looking at the outside, look at the inside, look at the aesthetics, look at the nuts and bolts of what make up a home, the roof and those type of things. As far as just automatically going in, I know we watch HGTV, perhaps some of these real estate shows that you see, and they're saying, well, gosh, you got to go in and put in new stainless steel kitchens and new bathrooms, etc. And it's all going to happen in a month. Well, I'm here to share with you that is impossible to have happen in Seattle's market. It's going to cost 2 or 3 times more than it costs them on the television show. And oftentimes the buyer will come in and decide to rip it out and start over. And so it didn't really enhance the value of your home commensurate with how much you spent. So again, it's a case-by-case basis, and it's very similar to staging one's home. I have a lot of clients who decide to move out first from where they live, come back and look and say, okay, now, does it need a little painting? Does it need a few little things? And do we decide we want to stage the house? Well, a lot of that can be determined based on how does the house look? What's the style? It's easy to say, yes, go on in and stage, but staging costs thousands of dollars, and it's a monthly bill as well. So I'm a proponent of the discussions had when we're looking at the property, not just a carte blanche. You got to do this, you got to do that to the house. If you're going to leave furniture in the house, or you're going to be living in your property while it's on the market, we need to look at how your furniture is placed. Does it, you've got let's say a bay window that looks out on a view, but you've got a hutch you inherited that's completely blocking the view. You've got a camellia bush that's now 20 feet tall that you planted when you first moved in. You can't see the view at all. Well, we need to look at those things and go, okay, this makes sense. We need to either move this here or whatnot. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I think it's really a case-by-case basis. Lastly, does the house feel like your home, or does it feel like a space the buyer can make their own? What this one refers to is many of us have a lot of pictures of extended family, pictures going all the way back to either when oneself or all their grandkids and kids were in high school, and they're all going down the walls of the stairway and in the hallway. Those are the type of things that it's really, you can't take offense to when it's recommended that those things get packed away. Because again, you're taking your memories with you, and you want your buyer to consider, yeah, I can see my pictures up there and whatnot. So again, some of these things are hard to swallow, but it's not personal. It's what it takes to have a successful selling of your property. So when it comes to downsizing, there are a couple factors that come up time and time again. And I've seen them personally. I've seen them in those different groups of people that are being told. The first one is letting go of our stuff. It's amazing how much stuff we accumulate over the years. But at some point, where you're going to perhaps move to isn't going to accommodate all your stuff, thus the downsizing. So letting go, it's huge. It's a huge psychological factor. And what I have experienced myself is, we look at the house, people start saying, okay, I'm going to downsize. So they start going through the things, and we all do it. We're looking at this stuff going into this box, and our minds start going down memory lane. Well, a month later, the box has moved to the bedroom next to the bedroom it started in, but the stuff's been taken out because we just can't bear to part with it. Well, at some point we get to get comfortable with letting go. Also, then there's the physical side of it. Going up into attics, trying to reach up to get certain things, moving things, chairs, sofas to try to save a few dollars. Yes, I know it's important to save as much as you can, but there is no glamour at this stage to, throw out a hip or have knee surgery or something occur because we tried to save ourselves a few dollars. So with the downsizing comes procrastination. And it's a natural thing. Very few times have I seen somebody, where it just moves very quickly. But the question comes up is, okay, well, who's going to help with this downsizing? Well, the first thing that comes to mind are, if you have family, local or even family from out of area, we tend to have a discussion, and the family wants to help. But of course, the families also can be very busy in their own careers. Did they have children of their own? Various things, but great intent, and they want to help. So what can tend to happen is the first meeting begins, family's over there with the coffee first thing in the morning, and now we're going to help downsize. Well, first thing they do, they set up the boxes and they start going room to room. They just pick the things up and go, do you want to keep this or not? Well, as this continues, if you're not prepared for it, the pace of the whole thing really accelerates, and it causes great angst, because what you find important for yourselves, and this really stems into like estate sales and whatnot. When we're downsizing, what might have been important to you, myself, silverware. Maybe you have a mint and china collection, pieces of furniture, various items that were very important back in the day. But when you're asking family members, estate sale companies, even charities today, they don't want the stuff. So if that happens, don't take it personally. Just you got to roll with it. Otherwise, again, if they're over on a Saturday helping, by the end of Saturday, everybody's exhausted. They were hoping to get it done in a day or two, and it could take weeks to get it done. I mean, think about it. How many years of stuff do you have there? Packing and sorting companies. In the last decade or so, they're called downsizing companies. And what they do is they will actually have people come to the house and help you with one, if you know where you're going to relocate to, they can take the floor plan or the space that you have and actually kind of fit things in to make sure that what you wish to take with you fits and works. What they'll do is they'll come out, they'll at your pace. And again, some people might go 4 or 5 hours. Others, a couple hours might be all that you're geared up for that day. And they'll help you sort it and decide, is it going to be given to children or friends or family? Is it going to be donated? Going to charity? Is there enough here to have an estate sale? Now, estate sales are different than garage sales. And estate sales, what they do is they take a percentage of your of the proceeds, sometimes 55%. So they want to make sure that the things that you wish to sell, that there's an actual marketplace for it today. As I mentioned, silver, etc., not that valuable anymore. But if you happen to, and I don't know if you remember back years ago, they had these little candy dispensers called Pez. These little plastic things where you pop the top of the head that popped up little candies. Well, a Pez dispenser collection or comic books or things from the 60s and 50s are worth thousands of dollars. That antique hutch that you're dearly in love with might be worth $200. It's just, but it is the way it is. So on the estate sales companies, if you think your environment, or if we were to visit, think maybe we should have somebody look at that, then that can happen before you start tossing out things that aren't of value to you. Those may well have a value in a return. So again, preliminary planning. At the very end of the day, once everything is gone, you have what's left, you have stuff. And they have clean out companies that will then come out, they charge by the truckload and the volume, and they will make the items go away. They try not to go to landfills unless it's just nowhere else to go. And then they charge accordingly to the size of the truck and the hours, that type of thing. The packing and sorting companies, they're $65, $70 an hour. Not only will they help you up front, but they can also go to where you're going, arrange for the mover, and actually meet the mover there and have everything put back into the place that you've decided where you want it to go. So it's really an invaluable tool. It sounds maybe a little pricey, but if you just have a moving company come out, they're going to have those young guys coming in. They start putting things in boxes, and they're $125 an hour because they're regulated by the state as to what can be charged. If you decide to pack your own items, keep in mind that the moving companies will not insure those boxes. Unless they do it themselves, they won't insure it. So again, you just want to make sure, no matter how good a job you do, at the end of the day, something happens, you're the one holding the bag. Questions, thoughts?
No questions in the chat box yet, but feel free to ask if you do have any.
All right. We touched bases a little bit about the home inspection. And again, the home inspection is meant to evaluate the structure and the mechanical condition of the house. It's not set up to determine what is the market value of the home. And there's basically two types of inspections today. There's the home inspection, and then there's the sewer line inspection. And in our marketplace today, there's companies that come out and they run a camera, like a rotor-rooter type of thing, down your sewer line till it meets the street where it taps into the public right away. The goal being to make sure that there isn't any major problems with it. If major problems arise, there may be some coverage with your insurance policy. I know they've started issuing riders. If not, it may have to be fixed. And there is really no set cost because it kind of depends. If they only have to go down 1.5 feet, 2 feet right outside, your front porch to clean out a line or fix it, that's one thing. If they've got to go out where you meet the street and have the street closed off and the city come in, it can be thousands of dollars. So I'm often asked, well, should we do those inspections ourselves so that we know before we go to the market what to expect? There's two schools of thought on that. One is when you do your home inspection and your sewer inspection, what comes up, you are responsible for declaring on what's called a Washington State disclosure form. It's a 6-7 page form that as a homeowner, you fill out to the best of your knowledge what you know about the house. So a lot of people go, well, no, I understand what there could be, but let's let the buyer pay for it and make their own decisions. Others say, well, no, I'd really rather know so that I can either fix it myself, which of course is less costly than if you have a buyer wanting to fix it and you pay for it. So I don't know that there's 100% right answer to that. If I'm asked which inspection, the sewer line inspections can be this big surprise because especially with the topography here in Seattle, if you're uphill a little bit, unless your sewer is backing up, you'd have no idea if there's a problem or not. So of the two, the sewer line's about $250 to have checked out. And then you can offer that to a buyer for their consideration. Home inspections can be anywhere from $450 to $700. A lot of it just depends on the size of the home, the type of the home, etc. If you own a condominium, they do inspections on the interior of your condo. There's not too much other than looking at the service panel underneath the sinks to make sure things aren't leaking. They're not really very involved because you only own your sheetrock of your home in. You don't own any of the common areas, so you're not in control of that. So again, a lot of buyers decide not to do a home inspection. What they will receive if you sell is from your homeowners association that's called a resale certificate. And it is a binder, or it's online now, of volumes of paper that talk all about your reserve studies, the financials of your building, any inspections that have been done, insurance policies. It's just laborious going through these, but that is something that the buyer does receive, and they go through it and they either approve it or they decide they don't wish to move forward. The same on the home inspection. If they do the home inspection after you're under contract and they come back and ask you to fix things, the options are to look at it and come to some arrangement, to look at it and reject it. You're not liable to fix everything a buyer may ask for. Again, it's a negotiable item. The only time that changes a bit is if you have a bank appraiser, like I mentioned, go out and they look at the condition of the home and call out whatever that might be as a condition of getting the loan. Then we've really got to have a discussion with the buyer. You still aren't obligated, but again, depending on the scenario, you hate to watch a buyer go away too, because they may not have the resources to step up and pay for it. But again, you're not tied up legally. It's just we handle it in the appropriate manner if it's presented to us. As far as inspections go as well, the last thing is in your properties, if you haven't, when you sell today, you need to have a carbon monoxide detectors, which they either plug in or they can be mounted on a wall. If you're doing it yourself, they tend to go down about plug level. In other words, you don't see many that are up at roof line, because if you're having carbon monoxide flooding in, it rises. And so by the time it's up to the ceilings, I guess there's no worries, because if you're in the house, you're in trouble. So again, these things go down. Just make sure you're using the type that screw in. You're not going into where an electrical line is. If you don't have them, I tend to have a couple boxes of them. I usually bring them over, make sure they're installed in the right spots. Those spots being, if you've got, let's say, 3 bedrooms on one level, you're walking down the hallway and you got a bath and 3, well, you put one in that hallway near the 3 bedrooms. Likewise, if you have a rec room or family room in the basement, you put one there. You don't put them in the kitchen, and you don't put them by your furnace type of thing. It's the living areas, so that it will go off should the gas start permeating the premises. So I guess a logical question, what's often asked is, do we go in and fix up the house or try to just sell it as is? If it's a major structural issue that we know is going to come out, most of the time it needs to be addressed. Again, I mean, there are some people that own homes that, with all the new contemporary homes being built, I know in the Seattle area market, sometimes you don't need to do anything because the house isn't worth any more than the lot. But that's not the norm. When looking at pricing the house for sale, it needs to reflect a little bit on the work needed. In other words, if you took 2 identical homes, one's got new kitchens and baths, you're next door with original, well, the one with the updates is going to be worth more. But again, it's generally not worth you spending the money to try to bring it up to your neighbor's condition, because the time and money it takes, you may not get the return at all or very little. And it's really not a direction I recommend people go in. Okay, let's talk a bit about how we go about pricing your property for sale. In our marketplace today, in most of the neighborhoods, the average market time on the market is 10, 15 days on the market. And that's what you're looking at here. It's called an activity curve. What happens is you go on the market, anybody that's in the buyer pool out there and their brokers see it, and they, of course, are motivated and will come out and immediately look at your property. And once that starts occurring, of course, the goal is to get the feedback to make sure our property is being, perceived in a positive light. And that's oftentimes, how is it priced compared to what's being offered? So important to do so. Well, the way one goes about it is to, once one takes a tour of the house, we factor in beds, bathrooms, upgrades, what's the lot like? What are the views like? Seattle's an area that has many views, and I mean, there are some streets out there, neighborhoods where your neighbor's view 2 doors down is spectacular, but yours, you have trees. So we look at views. We've got to look at all of these different factors as well as look at supply and demand. From there, we then go in within a radius of your neighborhood. That's the preference, is to stay within your location, and start looking at the sales and start seeing which ones compare in certain regards to your property. In other words, if you're on waterfront, well, if you don't have waterfront, we try not to use the 2 similar homes, because the waterfront creates a value that the other one won't get to. So it takes some time to go through and whatnot, but it's really pretty important if we're going to make a decision to go on the market, that a visual inspection be done. I'm in a position upon request to kind of show neighborhoods activity of sales, what the insides of various homes have been. But again, it would strictly be pulling up public records, maybe driving by your property, but without seeing the inside, I can get pretty good guesstimates for you, but it wouldn't be exact, just because you have to see what's going on. Whoops, excuse me. So that's what's called a market analysis, and they can be very in-depth or they can be ballpark. Again, if any of you, just depends on what, are you interested in kind of what the neighborhood's doing? Do you want a little more precise? Or are you just, kind of just checking it out? And knowing that, I'm more than happy to send you a binder that I put together that shows, you can see the pictures and kind of break it down to you. I can email things to you as well. It's really anything that you might request. So what you would do is you'd contact Elliot, and he would send me your home address and whatnot. And if it's an email thing, your email address. So lastly, the question comes up is, well, what does it cost to sell a house or a condo? And in our marketplace today, the industry standard is 6% of the sales price. 3% of that goes to the buyer's company and agent. 3% goes to the person representing you and their company. Now, from there, of course, that money is then distributed to the individual agent, and that's all based on the agreement the agent has with their real estate company. Your cost is set regardless of who sells it. Okay. We have state excise tax today, and it's in a 3-tier format, but it's roughly about 1.75% of the sales price. The reason I'm just giving you a couple of the more expensive line items is because the closing costs are all based on the sale price of your home. So I'm not able to, at this point, show you what each of your costs would be. But if you're to take roughly 8.4%, and let's say you're looking at your home and you're going, well, here's the assessed value for my taxes, or that type of thing. Well, if you just take 8.4% of that number, that sales price number or assessed value, look at that. That's going to be pretty close to the entire costs of selling one's property. Those are called closing costs. Now, in addition, if you're negotiating work on the house, those type of things, that's a whole separate scenario, not one we can really speculate on because we don't know what might present itself. Okay, well that covers what I had wanted to share with you today. Like I said, there's a lot of things. When you get into marketing, there's a number of things. But those discussions, of course, are better had. These items I touched on hopefully will start getting the wheels turning as to a guideline of how to think about this whole thing so that it doesn't become overwhelming. So that's pretty much it. I appreciate you all checking in this afternoon. Elliot?
All right, thank you for your time today, Dick. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat, so if anybody does have any questions that they would like to send to me, you can email it to me at elliot.hack@eraliving.com, ELLIOT.HAACK@eraliving.com. I'll be happy to forward those on to Dick and get back to you as soon as we have an answer.